Good afternoon, and welcome to Talks at Google in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Today, it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce two guests from the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Managing Director Mark Volpe and Music Director Andris Nelsons.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is the part where I usually do a lot of talking about the guests, but really isn't music what this is all about, so hold on just 1 second.
Those who are curious, that was Respighi's Pines of Rome. That was the inaugural concert of Andris as our music director of the Boston Symphony, and that concert was seen all over the United States on public broadcasting and all over the world through a variety of networks. So it's launched an incredible relationship, or an incredible marriage that's now over a year, a little over a year old. And so what I thought we could do, obviously we're always curious in what you're thinking, but what I thought I'd do is ask Andris a little bit about his background, a little bit about the art of conducting as well as the discipline of conducting, and then possibly open it up for questions from you all. So I'll start just a little bit about where, and ask Andris to talk about his earliest exposure. I think you conducted your first ring cycle when you were 5 years old in Riga. No. But your first exposure to classical music was Wagner. Your mother was a musicologist, but she took you to a concert in Riga. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes, it was very interesting because, for many kids and children, the first musical experience listening is probably a bit milder than mine was, because I was taken to the opera and I was only 5 years old, and it was Wagner's Tannhäuser, 4.5 hour long opera, which with not the most happy finish of the opera, as we know, but I was so amazed and so touched by the great music of Wagner from one hand, and from the other hand, being in the opera theater, experiencing, lights went down and all of this mystic atmosphere, conductor coming on and raising his hands, and something starts to sound and happen, and then there's this beautiful music, and then, poor Tannhäuser died at the end. I was crying, So it was a very big emotional really shock
awake.
For me. Yes, so, I couldn't sleep afterwards, and then,
Yeah. But you went from that and you started singing, and then you played the trumpet and it continues to play the trumpet. Andris now has you have a C trumpet, and now did you just get your E flat trumpet? Different trumpets come in different keys, and so before every rehearsal and concert, you hear him practicing and playing little things, and the BSO players want everyone to understand that it's not them. I don't know if that's a commentary on your current quality level, but anyway, so talk a little bit about how you picked up the trumpet and your whole the Russian system, the Latvian system of music education.
Yeah, well, since that first experience, firstly, of course, my parents are musicians, so I was always surrounded by music. Either other, one or other way, I always heard music around. Is it Bach, Renaissance music, Bach, or choir singing was always around. But of course, this first influence of Wagner opera, age of 5, made a huge impact. And then the same year, I started the piano studies in music school. So I studied until age of 12. I studied as a pianist, and then I started to study trumpet, age of 12, and then I parallelly studied singing, in music school and trumpet, and then it all got that I got the audition, won the audition, and I got a job at the age of 17 in the National Opera. And the same opera I saw this Tannhäuser, the same opera house, and I got a job, and I was so happy, of course, and I played there for 5 years as a trumpet player, and in the meantime, I also parallelly studied conducting, and it.
How do you study conducting?
The conducting is a very mystical. I think from one side, a very mystical profession. As you can see, you can see so many different conductors doing the same piece, but so different ways. It's all either technical waving of arms, or facial expressions, or tempo, or anything, but they're all different. And it's not because necessarily wanting to be different, but it means that there is the profession of conducting, on one hand, is very mystical because of communication with people. You communicate in a concert without words. You just communicate with the gestures, and you assume that the orchestra understand what do you mean, and of course, or not understand, because in your gestures, in your energy, in your facial or even body expressions, you encourage them to one or other character or dynamic or anything what is present in music at that point. And of course, all of that happens after intensive work in the rehearsal, of course, where you make your relationship with the orchestra and you build the interpretation in the rehearsal. And I think it's mystic because you as a conductor, I don't perform any note in the concert. They are all playing. So in the meantime, orchestra could do without, conductor can't do without orchestra. Orchestra could do without conductor.
Conductor without orchestra is just moving your arms, looking like a crazy person.
That's. But so that's why it's mystical. But there is also a very practical and very important part of studying conducting. You can, of course, there are many things you can and should study, and everyone studies. It's a technique. You read about the composers, you study the score, you analyze, you compare, you develop, you think, you don't sleep nights because you're not knowing what to do. All of these things happen when you develop as a conductor and as a musician generally. And of course, you develop your skills as a conductor. But I think that most important is this mystical chemistry, what happens between conductor and orchestra. And then, of course, conductor and orchestra and audience, because this is another extremely important, crucially important part of what we do in music. And if that happens, there is a miracle. And if it doesn't happen, we sometimes can't explain why. But if you go to the concert and we think, oh, it did not touch me, I didn't, obviously we did something wrong. If you go to the concert and after the concert you feel, I didn't understand anything, but I feel great because it was so emotional or so depressive or so whatever emotional reaction you got, if you got back fulfilled with with a feeling, it means that we did right things. So I think this is so much. I think what I think the profession of conducting, or actually the essence of music, really brings to us.
But what's interesting, if you're a violinist or a pianist, you can go in a practice room and you can sit and play scales and arpeggios and then repertoire. But if you're a conductor, you can study and you can learn your theory and your music history and all that. But the mysticism, the psychology, the leadership in terms of, you can only do that with an orchestra. So when did you start conducting orchestras, and what was that like for you? And were you surprised? I mean, you obviously were a serious musician and a family of musicians, but when you actually get up on a podium for the first time, you have any recollection when you got up in front of an orchestra?
Yeah, the first time I remember, that was you're absolutely right. It's the first step, of course, is studying the score and the technique, and you prepare, but it does not absolutely guarantee that you actually can be a conductor, and if you would come in front of the orchestra, or it would work. You don't know it until the moment when you actually first time come in front of the orchestra. And I experienced it. It was at the age of 17, it was a high school orchestra. I was playing myself in that orchestra. The conductor, who actually was my teacher, my first teacher, did not come to rehearsal for some reason. And we thought, well, I actually thought, why should we go home? I said, oh, let's rehearse. I know the piece because I'm studying conducting. Let's rehearse. It was Beethoven's First Symphony, I remember. And I went on the podium, and I felt so much at home. I can't explain that feeling. It's not because of feeling of, oh, now I'm on podium, so I can say some things, and these things have to be done because the way I'm saying, it's not anything to do with power, but the joy of sharing what I feel about music with these musicians, and the chance to express what I felt about that music, in that case Beethoven, was so fascinating that I thought, yes, now even after have studied, I've been 3 years since I studied, my technique. Since that moment, I first conducted the orchestra in rehearsal. But then I only realized, yes, I want to continue studying conducting. I want to become a conductor, because I think before experiencing, you can't really say whether you actually have the ability to come in front of orchestra, because it's connected so many things, psychology, and simply when you prepare for rehearsal. You can prepare and you can think what you will say to the orchestra or musicians, but when that moment comes, whether some people get very shy, they can't, they're shaking, they can't say anything because and they think, oh my God, I was so prepared, I can't do anything. Or opposite, there are some people who think, oh, he would never be a conductor. I mean, I would see people thought about me that because I'm still basically a shy person. I'm not a person who likes to, I'm really a shy person. I think everyone was really surprised. So you conducting, but and I was, and when
that include your mother or no?
And on the podium, I felt that I can express myself as a musician through conducting the best way, because I forget about myself. I'm not shy. I just think about music, and I enjoy sharing what I feel about music, and I enjoy actually the feeling of this great teamwork, because for me it's a teamwork, conductor, orchestra, musicians, and to interfere, to work together, that was.
But one of the things you said, you know right away when a conductor has done his preparations and has a few standard stock things they want to share with the orchestra. But orchestras, actually, speaking to someone who played in orchestra, and you've played in orchestras, that's much less effective than someone who's in the moment and reacting to what was going on stage. Because sometimes you prepare for something, you think there's always a few passages in all these pieces that are tricky, that are rhythmically tricky or harmonically difficult, and in terms of balance and all that. And some orchestras, you're prepared to correct something and it's perfect. and then the conductor still corrects it.
Yes, yes,
I mean, and you like they were so prepared for that moment, and they can't help themselves. And one of the great, I hear this from all the orchestras in Europe and that work with you, is that you're absolutely in the moment, and you're whatever's happening is something you've inspired, but it's not something that's so premeditated that it isn't effective. Talk about, a few questions that came to me. What's going? I mean, these are all scientists, so they're all thinking. What are you thinking about when we do our Google plays, the Mahler Sixth, the Bartók Miraculous Mandarin, the Tchaikovsky Sixth Symphony, what's going on? Respighi, Pines of Rome. What's going on in your head?
I think it's very interesting because, for one hand, of course, music is so directly connected to our emotional world and what we feel about music, whether it's sad or happy or loud or aggressive, or you have all ranges of music, and of course all that you immediately, your body reflects to all of these feelings. But if you analyze more, then actually the human body is a biological. There's a certain mathematics and a huge science involved in of course, when we talk, what is human being?
Starts with your heartbeat.
But I think still it's for us, it's for musicians, we want to touch the hearts of the listeners, or musicians on the stage, and of the listeners, and what happens in my head, it's I'm trying to imagine as deeply as I can how the composer, who we perform each night, either it's Mahler or Tchaikovsky, what we already it's already on Google Play, or many other things which will be possible also to hear for Boston Symphony on Google Play. But any other composer, I imagine that I'm living a life of that composer, and that day when it was performed or composed, and that night when we perform, I have a feeling that the piece was composed yesterday, and we are premiering the piece, and also all these emotions come through the head, and what is the piece about, what the composer experienced in his life or at that time. So that is a huge emotional and intellectual baggage what you experience, me at least in my mind, in my body. And of course, when performing it, this is a mystic, how you get it out of your body to transfer to the musicians. And that's where, of course, it's a combination of a brilliant, fantastic orchestras, Boston Symphony Orchestra, our brilliant relationship with the orchestra, our trust to each other, trust in the professionality, also trust in human musicality, and also their trust in my subjective vision about the piece. So it's all at the end teamwork, but there is also it's not like a exaggerated democracy in terms that everyone can do whatever you feel, because then it's all chaos. So I think we all are focusing our minds, and I think the engine has to come from me, that we are focusing on the composer's idea, what the composer wants to present.
But how do you balance the need for collective thinking, but yet you don't want to stymie the individual personalities, especially in solos? So how does that, you try to establish, a culture, a way of doing it, and then you let them give them a little freedom, you give them,
because every musician, they are, or the orchestra, they've studied many years, some 20 and more, and played. Some are playing for already, 50 years or so, and they've played it so many times. So you can't, I think it's the giving and taking constantly. So when you, as a conductor, you play some certain place, you conduct. Let's say it's a first oboe or first trumpet or cello. There is a solo moment, and I personally like to listen to the soloist, how he or she presents the phrasing, and I listen, I see, and I often think, oh, that's great. I will follow her or his heartbeat, and then again I take initiative a little later, and then sometimes maybe I suggest, well, maybe let's try to go that route together, or this is a constant giving and taking and respecting and searching together and trusting. It's somehow and psychologically feeling when do they need you as a conductor, when do they need the beat,
Right.
and when they don't need to be disturbed. It's very interesting. There's great conductor Karajan told, it's like riding a horse, horse jumping.
Right.
You don't have, I don't ride the horse, so I can't tell.
We're not encourage you to jump on horses either.
But
That's not a good thing.
so when you conduct, it's when you're riding the horse,
Rhythm.
and then you have this barrier, and then you have to find the right moment where you push the horse in order to because the horse is jumping himself, of course, but you have to give is it right to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, you pull back and
pull back, and if you constantly pull the horse, he will throw out you from the the back. And the same he told us with the orchestra. If you constantly are disturbing the orchestra, but not in the moments when they really need you, they don't need the conductor at that point. And it's so difficult. I think it takes all your life to really find where is this moment where they really need you as a conductor in terms of purely technically beating and also more emotional support, and where are the moments where you're stepping out, not out, but stepping aside and letting things and initiative and individuality of each orchestra musician come forward, and then again where you take initiative to take all the complex individualities together. So it's a very confusing, exciting, mystical, and also scientific, in that sense I find, because it is to do with a heartbeat. And the heartbeat goes according to our inner state of if you are excited, obviously it goes fast. If you are, your time comes to leave this world, obviously it goes a little slower, and so on.
eventually it stops. That's the bad moment.
There is and in music the same. The music gets agitated. Of course, your heartbeat was faster, and then so. In that sense, it's not mathematical, I believe, but it is scientific.
Scientific.
It's scientific because already biological, the body, it is a science. It's not a mathematical maybe in that way, but it is scientific.
Close enough. It's interesting because for relatively speaking, I mean, we had last week on the podium Christoph von Dakiani, who's 86. And we were talking about you and talking about different things, and I've talked to Haitink, who's 86. It took him a while to learn how to trust orchestras. And you know right away, and the orchestra knows right away when they're not trusted. Yeah. I mean, when everything has to be controlled and there's no, and they're as you know, there are passages you know better than anybody, they need you, but there are other, to your great it's a maturity. Talk a little bit, when you walk through this building, you get a sense of a Google culture. We talk a little bit with our board about culture at the Boston Symphony. Every orchestra. I mean, you were just in Amsterdam. You conduct Berlin. You conduct in London. Talk a little bit about the culture that you are trying to create, and the trust and all that, and relationship, because it's when you think about it, and I don't want to alarm you, but we're obviously a sonic art form, yet the most important person makes no sound, and so it has to inspire, has to, motivate people to do what you want. Talk a little bit about how you create that kind of.
Yeah, it's again very, I think, individual in a way, and I think it's probably. I mean, as a huge company as Google, of course, it's more than 120 people who I have orchestra with 120, and sometimes you have bigger chorus, and so. But anyway, I think
Google's bigger than us. We'll
yes.
we'll concede that right away.
I'm thinking, but anyone who is in charge, I think, if you constantly, dictate and say, you should do that because I want, and if you don't make the musicians to believe or to trust, or maybe not agree as well, but to say, okay, I don't agree with him, but actually the idea is interesting, I will follow. At least you get to that point, because human beings are different and music is so subjective. You cannot say one is right and one is absolutely wrong. I mean, there are obvious things with the tempos or dynamic, which of course, or wrong note, probably it is a wrong note at that moment. I mean, philosophically maybe not, but but that thing of trust is very, very important thing for conductor. I mean, but it's from both sides. If orchestra feels the conductor doesn't trust them, the orchestra doesn't trust the conductor, and if the orchestra doesn't trust the conductor, then for me, I was playing in the orchestra myself. I mean, it was a joke, a kind of bad joke. But I think if the conductor, I was a trumpet player at that moment in orchestra. When the conductor, it's the worst thing for conductor was to stop and say, well, please follow me. And as soon as the conductor did that,
game's over.
You're finished, because everyone literally starts to follow you. And of course, we know that physiologically, or what, the beat, the timing between when you show it can't be. It's not really to do with the physics.
Yeah. Well, light and sound travel, as you all know, at different speeds. So it breaks down right away.
So therefore, you can't really say that, and you shouldn't say that. It is rather, I always think it's rather that orchestra musicians, I think, in my opinion, is like a big chamber music group. So they hear each other, they listen to each other, they know what happens in the family. What the harps play, when they know what the double bass is or the flute plays, and then they can follow the line of orchestra. And then this is like a big family and organism during the symphony, which play. There is one instrument group, another instrument group, and it's very interesting, I think, also for orchestra to be part of this organism. And of course, the conductor, I sometimes feel like a drawing with the colors, with this great orchestra, what we haven't. It's just emphasizing one color or more darker, and we have all brilliant players, and I'm just so lucky, and so that's how I operate, and I've been really, really lucky to have such a great team, which is again a team. It's a teamwork with a great management, and a great orchestra, and a great audience, and a fantastic concert hall, and also I really, really feel, and we all feel, and it is so honestly privileged and very naively happy that we can be part of this wonderful project, which is Google Play, and now presenting these live possibilities to listen to these concerts of these great orchestras, and of course Boston Symphony Orchestra and other orchestras, because I think it makes us so happy, because it's so important for present and for future to share our great music, classical music, but to share it not only as a document, but to share it as an emotional act, because every concert is really emotional act, and every concert is different, and then with your great help and your great inspiration, we make these concerts, capture them, and then each of these concerts are different, and because they are live, you can't experience it anywhere else but just listening. Then I think so. I'm just really very, very happy about this fact, because I think there absolutely is a future for classical music, and actually the future for classical music it is in cooperation and in and actually looking into the similarities, collaboration, what is in between the art forms, and not only art forms, between other institutions we can find. I mean, of course, a great company as Google Play is of course a lot of science, of course, but we have also a little science, and And it's I think you can see the parallels how it works in the music.
Sure.
Maybe it's more mystical, but it's, you know, we cooperate and we have this great platform to perform and to show how we perform and to be proud of that. You have a platform to share that with wider audience. We are already doing a great thing together for classical music and for future of the education of humanity. I mean, this is maybe as...
Well, one of the interesting dimensions of this relationship is the Android platform does very well in emerging parts of the world. They do well everywhere. And where you see an emerging middle class, whether it be China or whether it be various parts of South America and other parts of the world, all of a sudden you see classical music. I mean, there's 60 million kids in China right now playing either violin or piano. I mean, that was unthinkable 25 years ago. Certainly unthinkable during the Gang of Four reign. You know, so all of a sudden you see a little capitalism, maybe a lot of capitalism, and you see the real development of classical music infrastructure. We were there right prior to Andris's ascension as our music director, and it's just amazing. You know, when the Boston Symphony was the first orchestra to play first orchestra to play the Soviet Union in '56, courtesy of Khrushchev, and then first orchestra to play China after a normalization of relationships. And back then they could play in a big gym, college gym, and then the People's Hall, you know, because there was no place to play. And now you've been to China, you know, there are 5 halls in Beijing, including a few they built for the Olympics. There are 3 halls in Shanghai, Guangzhou, all this infrastructure they're building, and are looking to us as a model, you know, not necessarily to replicate because it's a completely different culture. A lot of these folks, I think, I have a sense of the room, have been to concerts in the hall and all that, but there are going to be people watching this that might not have been, you know. So talk to someone who's not heard, you know, the Boston Symphony, not heard, you know, classical music. What you know, you've already talked about the emotional release, but talk a little bit about how they should approach it, and you know, because there's certain, especially in America, there's a certain it's highbrow, or it's intellectually too, you know, difficult. I can't get there. I didn't have it in school. How do you overcome that?
Yes, well, I think I would start with a metaphor. You know, when we think about the food, you know, for our physical body, we think of you know, certain products. I mean, some people like more vegetables, some people like fruit. It depends what diet you but you need something to eat in order to survive, and you don't question this. You choose what you eat, but I think the same is we have with our emotional world and the soul, which is part of this of the body. It also needs a source for feeding, and I think through music and art and culture, this is a way you can feed your soul, and you can choose whether your soul prefers Beethoven or Mahler or you know, any other composer, or actually by eating a lot of Mahler you actually enjoy it more, and with some is actually eating as a dessert, not too much. So, but I think this is a kind of metaphor which generally, really, I can see in my life, and I really would say that the music is a food or nourishment for our souls. It's really necessary. We don't see it so obvious as, you know. Now I get the tea, you know, as this. But actually, when you go to the concert and you listen to certain piece, you feel you've drank a 10 of the really English breakfast, very strong teas, much more than this cup, and you can't explain what happened, but you feel energized. You can, you know, and that's just because of the concert. And even if you don't know the composer, but that's what the music can give, and what the music gives, and there's a wide range of emotions. If you are in love, you know, as a teenager, or as an old lady or gentleman, when you're again in love with your husband or wife, you go to the concert of, I don't know, you go to listen Puccini's music, or you go to Richard Strauss, and the so beautiful melodies, you start to cry and you think, oh my God, oh, it's so great I married this person. Oh, it's, you know, music reminds of some things and reflects to your emotionality. And that's the way how actually I believe you can become better and more sensitive. And that's what I think we also need in our lives, the sensitivity and compassion. And, you know, that is what the music gives. There is a lot of range, as I told you. Know, it's also, you know, there is aggression in music sometimes. There is a power, but there is all the variety what you can get through music. And the most important that I think either children, and it's great if it starts in a young age, but at any age that people are simply informed and they have this chance to experience by either coming to concerts or therefore I'm saying it's such a great way also with the great support of Google Play. Now many people I'm sure will listen to these concerts, and I really encourage them to listen to for the first time hearing an orchestra, and I'm sure they will find something close to their hearts, and that will be a reason for them to listen again, or actually to come to the concert, or to ask mom, oh mom, I don't know, what was it? I really enjoyed that. Can you put it again? It's like for my daughter, I have a small, almost 4-year-old daughter, which is the biggest, you know, most important thing in my life. And I play, you know, she doesn't know what the name, but when I play, actually, I got my trumpet.
You brought your trumpet.
Back after 15 years not playing, I got it the present. So. And I play something. She said, no, not that. Can you do? And I play the slow movement of Haydn trumpet concerto. And she, yes, that's. Can you play that? She doesn't know what it is.
She's already a critic. No,
but she said, yeah, you can. Yeah. And I play something taller. No, Dad, please shut up. You know. So
there
she
is likes the lyrical, the smoother
and you see that there is a soul maybe asks for, you know, for that kind of food, which is more lyrical.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way I think it's just important that we introduce. The children or any age people with the music, and I think there should be no worries or reservations because thinking that the music is, you know, so-called for more intellectual. It is absolutely not like that. It is really for everyone. It is absolutely for everyone, and it talks to everyone in very individual ways. When you go to listen to, for example, Tchaikovsky's Sixth Symphony, which is our first release at Google Play, we know the story of Tchaikovsky, but when you listen to that symphony, when you talk to people...
Last movement is just torturous.
And this movement talks, but to everyone it talks in a different way. It actually talks very personally. Everyone starts to think about their lives. And so there's never one way how the music really approaches the same people the same way. So it is, therefore, I just can encourage, just take care of your soul as well as much as your body. Well, I don't care of my body enough, but take care of your souls. And concerts and music is an art, is a great, and I would say the only way of really getting to caring about that part of your human being. There is another part with the intellect, another part which is you need to take care, and
music can help with that too.
And music helps with that too. So you know, so just come to the concerts, and I'm really thankful for Google for this great opportunity to share, and that is one of the ways to get the thing closer to people's hearts through sharing and through media. Through that, you are so great that you're really helping and supporting that, because I think this is the future.
It's funny when Andris was talking about, you know, how certain moments in music can remind you of you know, falling in love with your spouse or partner or whatever. That I was thinking that in the last run of concerts, which we did here in Boston and Carnegie, we did Electra, which is about kids who want to kill their parents. So I mean, it kind of covers the whole spectrum there. It's still Greek. It wasn't something. Actually, Strauss did. It was something the Greeks did 2,300 years ago, but thereabouts. Any questions, sir?
I just want to say I'm so thrilled with everything you've done so far to energize the BSO, both in programming and the performance. It's been fantastic. I'm also really thrilled that we got your wife along with you. It seems like the best 2-for-1 deal ever. And that is actually relevant to my question. It's a good segue from Mark's last comment too, because the two concerts that I've personally found most exciting have been Salome and Electra. It's just been fantastic that you brought those operas to the BSO and had such amazing performances of them. I wonder if you could, just a two-part question, if you could talk a little bit in general. I know you obviously have a deep connection with opera from your childhood, your wife, and all kinds of things. I wonder if you could talk about a little bit about the challenges of conducting opera on stage in a place like Symphony Hall as opposed to an actual opera stage, first of all. And secondly, what's the next one that we're going to see? And I have a suggestion if you don't have one planned yet.
It's already booked, but we'll listen to
Oh,
your
good.
suggestion, too.
I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear it. I really want to know what it is. I'd also love to hear you do something like Bluebeard's Castle sometime. I think that would be fantastic.
Have you done that? With Bartok? You'd be
No,
great.
thank you.
Yeah, Bluebeard's Castle is it's Bartok's only opera. It's deeply psychological. It's also fairly easy to stage because it only has 2 singers, and there isn't a lot of movement on the stage, so you could really do it. I think it'd be fantastic. Anyway, go ahead. You talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
New music advisor here.
Yes. Yes. Well, no. Thank you. I'm absolutely, thrilled to be here. And as I told, the amazing team. I experiencing and more and more how great this institution is, the orchestra and the team. And and this works only because it's a great team as well. And thank you for for you saying about the operas. I mean, we enjoy every concert, of course, but I think opera always is we do it every season, one concertante so far, and this is always a great excitement because orchestra normally they don't play opera every day or even every month, or it's really not often. And besides, of course, the musical differences, because having more soloists and the different music which is not played every day on the chorus, or of course the challenges the technical challenges which it brings. There is also an extra thing which is so healthy to develop, I believe, also in symphonic music, is this way of listening to each other, and following your one is heartbeat, but actually it's your breathing. Because when you sing, when you play opera, and you, of course, as a conductor or orchestra, you accompany a certain moment of soloist singing. You can hear the soloist sings, and and he or she needs a breath, and then so it reminds you that making music it's to do with the live organism, and I think by performing opera, you kind of really notice it, and it works so greatly in advance for listening to each other, following, supporting, and sometimes you feel, soloist is running out of breath, so we need a little help, and you can't predict it. One rehearsal is like this, one rehearsal the other way, one performance is this, so you need to react. For me as a conductor and orchestra as well, they say, okay, so tonight probably the soloist had a bit of sore throat, so we will have a bit, or I'm being very, very cynical, but these aspects, being aware, listening, makes it very, very alive. And I believe that we follow that pattern actually when we do the symphonic concerts as well, that to be constantly alert and dramatic in terms of there's a drama in each symphony, But I think opera is, of course, a very exciting thing, which we will do every season, and there will be one next season too. So, and thank you for your suggestion. That's a great opera too. Yeah.
Which one is it?
Because of the camera rolling here, I can't announce next year. When
Later.
we're over in the corner,
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later. I'll tell you, because it involves you preface your comments about Andris' incredibly beautiful and talented wife, Christina. She is going to be with us at Tanglewood, and since we're announcing Tanglewood on Thursday? we're going to do the first 2 acts of Aida with the BSO and Christina, and there are a few other people involved in that. But
And Tanglewood
and
as well. So it's-
Tanglewood, I don't mind telling you. Next season, it's a little premature.
But because it's opera, and it's great. But for me, as I have conducted opera a lot, and obviously symphonic, and have played opera in orchestra as well, I think that they are not huge. I mean, there's a lot of similarities because of the drama and how to understand the symphonic music. I understand it through the same idea of breathing, of heartbeat, and of the drama. You of course have more fantasy to think what the drama is about, but there are some similar elements of making music, the way of making music, but you know.
But when we meet with our artistic committee from the orchestra, and we meet with them, we're meeting with them tomorrow morning at 9 and showing them repertoire, everyone has their own, the brass players love the Mahler and the Bruckner, string players Bruckner, not so much, but they all gravitate to the opera because they don't do it, we do it once a year. I mean, and so for them, it's like when the Metropolitan Opera goes and plays a concert. It's very special for them, and it's great because Andris is absolutely right. Speaking as a former musician, it's a different. I mean, there's so many similarities. It's still music, but it's a different approach when you're working, with singers and all of that, and the breathing is absolutely critical to that whole way of approach. But so I think it's great with Andris, who is very comfortable in both the concert as well as the opera, and we do a little bit of staging, but not too much, because one of the challenges of Symphony Hall is one of the smallest stages. I mean, it's funny, when we went to Carnegie and took, electorate at Carnegie is so much, it's probably twice the size in terms of square footage of stage, different. So we can do different things with that than Symphony Hall, where,
but also, this the privilege to do, like we did, this year Electra or Salome last year, a little year before. I mean, with such a brilliant orchestra as Boston Symphony, because you have to have it's so challenging, and
they're written for the orchestra being in the pit, so you need a really great orchestra to know how to.
Yeah. So and in the meantime, it's a challenge to play, but also a challenge to be not overpowering all the time, and the balancing is very challenging. Actually, in opera concertante, and particularly, when we talk about Electra, it's one of the most challenging to balance it in a concert version, even in a staged version. But this is all really exciting because, and also that part that every concert is different, I love it so much that even we always prepare, of course, for anything we do, but there is this mystical, unexplainable moment of spontaneity, and not planned spontaneity, but it just comes because of the day. Today is more sunny than yesterday, or then your mood is different, and your tempos are a little different, and I mean, this is exciting. That's what makes it so great to perform the same piece 100 times, and it always will be different. And I think, and that's why coming to concerts or listening to concerts, and of course this great opportunity to listen live or not live, but you never find two exactly the same performances of the same piece of any orchestra.
Other questions? Two questions back there.
So you talked a lot about the emotion of the music and your role as a conductor to bring that out. How do you balance that with the fact that you're rehearsing every day and you have to get the technique right, and like there's kind of like how do you keep that feeling and balance the kind of practical management and practice and technique?
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. It's because of course by talking, it's emotion, and it's a constant brain activization and planning, and one can think, how long you can live like that, it's because it's but this requires a lot of planning for example, of my time, so I know there's a big intensive period of working, and then I know I need to recharge my batteries, and of course the best way is when other, the other people say, oh, I'm going on holiday, whether they go somewhere, they fly somewhere, or when I say I go to holiday, I go home, I'm with my daughter and with my wife. And it can be as simple as just being home and playing all day with my daughter and going to have a dinner, and that's the most exciting thing after a big philosophical journey of great operas or symphonies. And then again, after that period, you recharge your batteries by living a normal life, because I think the music at the end is about our life. It's not so much only about the higher philosophical things. Of course, there are always questions and philosophy and the subtext and so on. But at the end, it is about what we feel. It's about our lives. The music, it is about our lives. So then, living normal life and recharging the batteries. From there, you come back, and you have something more to say again. So this is a constant planning of your. Everyone has a different kind of power and balancing the body and mental abilities to. But again, this is a.
But in terms of technique,
technique, yeah.
One of the things about a Boston Symphony that it's not unique to Boston. There are a handful of other great orchestras, but they come in, they can play everything. Andris's focus is not on you have to play E flat instead of E. I mean, if a person, they're mortal, they make mistakes, but that's just a slip of whatever. They don't make mistakes, and
that's of course absolutely right. I mean, it's a privilege having a great instrument, a great team, because with a huge high level of professionality, which gives a great trust from me, and then your concentrations become more clear, where you put your energy and where, how you divide you put your energy and emotionality more, because this is such a jewelry feeling to be in front of these amazing musicians. So of course, that's also how you plan in terms of the technique. I also realized, of course, more and more that for conductor, even though it's very mystical as a result, but a simply clear technique, whether it's with beating or one or other way or with your face, but more clear expressions through your hands are always very helpful, more helpful than talking, let's say, to orchestra, because the orchestra, sometimes you as the conductor would think, okay, so I would want to explain. I mean, I know I'm talking now too much; it's so boring already, but for you, but if you start to talk to orchestra, oh my God, so they'll say, please show us what you want, yeah. And this is as cynical as that, but some things it's very important. The technique, the manual technique. So you should put everything in your hands and your face. What you feel in your heart, you can express with your hands and your face. The musicians can see whether you are being very dry, and there is a beautiful melody. You're beating it right, or your heart is also there, and they feel it, and that's. Yeah. Also, you need to have a technique and a preparation, and I also think. Which involves the technical preparation, professional and intellectual, but I think it's also important to train, also to train the emotionality as well, because
It's interesting. We try to anticipate possible roadblocks, and you have these younger conductors who aren't nearly as sophisticated and musically and artistically developed as Andris, and we. It might be a Brahms symphony, and we tell them, and then they sit there and talk for 15 minutes about the history of the Brahms symphony. This is an orchestra that's played it with Bernstein, Vandakiani, Mazur, Levine, Ozawa, Andris Nelsons, and it's like they're the ball game over. I mean, they're professional, they get through it, but they have, they're in my office at intermission at the first break of the rehearsal saying, what? Whose
Yes.
idea was this? I say yours. No. I think do we have time for like one or two more questions? Anybody?
The need for music to some extent in developing emotionally as a human person. I'd be interested to hear whether you think this is especially important in children, and given that there are many children, whether it's for economic reasons or you see political instability and many countries don't have access to that, how would you like to see the BSO specifically and the music community in general help reach children with that beauty that they do need at a critical age in their development?
Yes, thank you. That's very, it's very, very important. What you say, it's very, very right and very important. Of course, it's not only about music as a as a privilege or as a fortunate gift what God has given us, the music or art or any, but the music actually can also be very much like I can't say the word medicine, but it's like a comfort, and there's as you say, I mean, in particular periods of life or particular groups of people or where the music can solve many problems and can help. And I think by reaching to those people or those areas are of course very important. I mean, I know that in Boston Symphony, there's already, of course, I met several times a great team of education department who are planning the special activities for children and for younger children, for very young children, and they are involving different things. It's concerts, but also activities like children trying the instruments or different ways of activities, how they can be in touch with music. And these activities all regularly planned with the orchestra. And of course, these are things which in future and present are very crucial, of course. And I know, of course, that from one side, concerts and activities happening in the symphony hall, but there are also activities where musicians go to the schools or to the communities to find also the way to those children or these people who can't come to concert hall simply because of several reasons, or obvious, sometimes obvious reasons. So this is very right and very important. I mean, we have to.
It's very. Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
About 8-9 years ago, the then Premier of China was visiting Washington, New York, and Boston, and I had the privilege of sitting with him, and I was curious because I said it's obviously it's a capitalist society, but it's still strictly controlled by the party, and I was talking to him why music. Why have you invested so much in this musical infrastructure and pedagogy and physical plant and all that? And he says, when you think about music, and he was actually giving me a lecture about America's lost its way because they've not seen fit to invest in the same way. And he says, it's rhythm is math, physics is acoustics. I mean, and that's what we group dynamic. If you're part of an ensemble, you have to subliminate. You have to your ego and be part of a greater good, a whole. Then you start talking about languages. I mean, music is an abstraction. It's a language. And if you start talking opera, they come in 6-7 languages. So there's the language element. Music is all rooted in whatever historically was going on. Beethoven and Napoleon, I mean, obviously had ambivalent feelings at a certain point, and it's not just classical music. It obviously goes far beyond classical music, and you look at the Negro spirituals and all that as political statements and how people have organized their movements and that. So the Chinese have decided, as a matter of public policy, that music, in terms of training the next generation, there's not room for 60 million professional musicians even in China. But they believe, like the Greeks and like the Romans, but more the Greeks, that to be educated you had to have music. It's one of the 7 disciplines. They always talk about 7 disciplines, and music was one of those 7 disciplines. And the Chinese are back there, and you go to Beacon Hill, you go to Capitol Hill, and it's not clear our political leadership is as savvy and as intelligent when it comes to such things. So it's interesting. The music does have a role beyond, obviously playing, and emotionally and connecting, it has played a political role, it has played a social role. You see where music, it's interesting that the most extreme is of what's going on in the Mideast, they ban music. And if you start looking at some of the fundamentalists who are driving some of the, it's pretty scary notion. But music is absolutely forbidden, and that suggests something in terms of the power of music right there. Thank you. It's been a great opportunity, and enjoyed the chance.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.